Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you do not miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we are going to analyze the Hindu dated 12th of June 2020. Displayed on the screen is a list of articles that we are going to discuss today. Timestamping for the same has been provided in the description of the video. Let's begin our analysis. Page number 6 of today's newspaper highlights an important piece of information which says a case for quiet diplomacy. The subheading of the article reads, a public debate would have hindered the resolution of past standoffs with China. Now, this topic is important from the perspective of General Studies Paper 2 and it will come under international relations. As a subtopic, it will come under India and its neighborhood relations. Now, you must be aware of the fact that both India and China have seen standoffs, especially in Ladakh region and also in some region of Sikkim and Bhutan. The author wants to highlight that the way in which these standoffs are handled by India is something which is very different from the previous policy. Previously, India used to follow quiet diplomacy. Now, in this context, there are few terms that we need to understand before we understand the purpose of the article. In this context, we have highlighted what are the important terms. So, in this context, let's first understand what is a soft power. Now, there are different ways of managing diplomatic relations. There is a way which is called as hard negotiation or hard power. And when we talk about hard power, one of the ways to express hard power diplomacy is through gunboat diplomacy. At the same time, there is another type of diplomacy which is called as soft power, which India normally practices. Now, let's try to understand what is soft power. Now, when we talk about politics, especially in international relations, soft power means the ability to attract and cooperate rather than coerce. Now, coercion is basically a hard power. So, in simple words, we can say that soft power involves in shaping preferences of others through appeal and attraction. So, let's try to understand what we want to do. Now, suppose there are two countries, country A and country B. Now, these countries can actually be neighbors or they can be managing their relations. Now, when they manage their relations, they have multiple ways of doing it. Either A can arm twist B in accepting something, which would be more of a hard power. In this particular mechanism, both countries are always ready to go on war. Now, the second aspect that we can talk about is soft power. Now, India as a country is known as soft power, which basically likes to attract and cooperate rather than coerce. So, the mechanism of soft power works through appeal and attraction. These two countries basically try to find out grounds on which they can work together and build better relationships. So, the basic defining element of soft power is that it is non coercive in nature. So, how this entire mechanism is basically run through? This mechanism is run through cultural exchange, political values, and through foreign policies in which both support each other on common grounds. Another significant feature of soft power is that it is mostly done away from the limelight of media and meetings. Now we have understood the idea of soft power. Now within the soft power, we can understand what is quiet diplomacy. Now when we talk about the quiet diplomacy, it is actually conducted in these forums of soft power and it is done in a way which is inclusive in nature and it primarily focuses on census building and momentum rather than hectoring, lecturing, posturing, or threatening. So you can see here that we have highlighted that when we talk about what is a no for quiet diplomacy, so we've highlighted hectoring, lecturing, posturing, and threatening. So what will come under yes under quiet diplomacy? It will be consensus and inclusive nature of the entire process. Now, quiet diplomacy basically uses the back channels and personal contacts established by ministers, departments, heads, corporate movers and shakers, and major NGOs, etc., to further the country's goal. So, with this comes an important point. Have you ever witnessed quiet diplomacy? So, can you recall an event in which a particular country has become a focus country for a news channel where they are trying to invite people for investment or for tourism or for cultural exchange? So, these kind of events basically show that country is following quiet diplomacy where they are trying to build consensus and also inclusive in nature. The goal of the nations or the organizations using soft diplomacy is to get its view filtered upward towards the target group. So this is a type of slow and subtle way of negotiating things. So with this, we are going to discuss what is the author's point of view in this particular article. Now in this context, we'll be focusing on three important points that author has highlighted. The first point is very important. First, opposition has a tendency to brand the government in power as weak government. Now, for this, author basically highlights multiple incidents where BJP has branded Congress government or UPA government in power as weak government in terms of its negotiation with Pakistan and China. At the same time, author also highlights the current context that Rahul Gandhi, who is a leader of Congress party, called union government as weak in terms of its negotiation power with China and Pakistan. Now, the point is why author has highlighted this particular thing. The author has highlighted because political parties control the opinion of people who are there in the party or those who support that particular ideology. So, if Congress party or any other party brands the government as weak, it basically projects the image of government as weak, and there is more tendency of rise of ultra nationalistic policy which become difficult to handle in the long run. Now, the second important point which author highlights that Modi government, which came into power second time, rode the wave of nationalism as well. And somewhere, because of the kind of ideology they have trying to make India great again, just as the Trump administration is trying to make US great again. So what author basically wants to highlight that the current government has a tendency or propensity to go for hard tactics or diplomacy, and the channels of soft diplomacy has taken a back seat. Now in this case we can see that there is a little bit of irony when we talk about the foreign policy of India. Now when we talk about the emphasis of Modi government on foreign visits aligning with international leaders, it seems that government is trying to go for soft diplomacy. At the same time, in its own backyard with Pakistan and China, we are resorting more towards hard diplomacy. Now, some of you would say that the kind of hard diplomacy posture that government has shown is because of the reaction from the Pakistani side and Chinese side. Now, in this context, the author highlights that the central government in power has less faith in being a soft power and quiet diplomacy, and hence soft diplomacy as an ideology has taken backstage in India and its neighborhood. We have resorted more to chest thumping and have remained aggressive in handling cross border issues. Now, in this background, we need to understand why author supports the soft diplomacy aspect. Now, the first point that author highlights is that hard diplomacy can lead to full blown war. Now, you might have observed few things in the recent past. We have seen excessive deployment of forces along the Jammu and Kashmir border and also along the Chinese side. Now, whenever we go for excessive deployment, it basically unnerves the neighbor and they also follow similar kind of strategy. The point is, whenever we go for excessive deployment on both the sides, the chances are that it can lead to full blown war in that particular area. So, that is why hard diplomacy as a first point is not accepted by author. Second important aspect is whenever such kind of hard diplomacy is being negotiated, other forums or platforms take a backseat, and hence finding solution through negotiation or other mechanisms become much more difficult to implement. The third important thing that author wants to highlight that discussion about hard diplomacy through media houses and media channels, also through social media, limits the scope of negotiation for soft diplomacy or quiet diplomacy. Now, in this context, author basically highlights 4 or 5 things that have happened in the recent past. You might have heard about Mr. Sonam Wangchuk, who is also a social media influencer. In his some of the sessions, he has asked for boycotting the Chinese goods, and he is trying to put across the idea of negotiating with China by putting pressure on its wallet. Now, this is something which is also considered a tactic or a move to put pressure on the neighboring country. At the same time, when we move to Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, we see that there are more problems available. We have seen that delete Chinese app or deleting TikTok app become a rage in the country. Now, in this context, this is also a system in which people to people negotiation is badly hampered. And this is not the part of soft diplomacy that author proposes. And hence, author is of the idea that these kind of media houses as well as social media groups should not limit the scope of diplomacy for India. The last point that author highlights is that soft diplomacy has remained more successful for India in the past, and hence there is no such need to change its approach for this particular aspect. Now, author also highlights that there are few things that government must do in order to ensure that they are not forced to take a strong stand against the neighbors. Now, in this context, the first point that author highlights that opposition should be informed and they should be a participant in this entire process of democratic decision making. The author feels that the government in power is not informing the opposition leaders and parties, and hence there is a backlash from the other political groups. And this is something which is not good for India's relationship. Second important aspect that author highlights is to proactively engage media so that media houses behave in a rational fashion and do not fuel war jingoism. Now, the point that author highlights in this particular article are more important from the perspective of international relation and also from the perspective of mains examination. Suppose you have been given a question in the UPSC examination, that is mains examination, about what is soft diplomacy or what is your suggestion in terms of improving India's relationship with the neighboring countries, what kind of approach should be followed. You can utilize this particular article to answer that question. Page number 1 of today's newspaper highlights an article which talks about IIT Madras top institution in government ranking. This article is important from the perspective of National Institutional Ranking Framework, that is NIRF. And this is very important from the perspective of coming prelims examination as well. So we'll be focusing on the important aspects about NIRF. Now, the context of the news is very clear to you. National Institutional Ranking Framework under the Ministry of Human Resource Development has released India ranking of 2020. These rankings are released for the institution of higher education in 10 categories. Now here 10 categories is very important because earlier there were 9 categories. So that is why it is important. So what is the new category that is added? One new domain, that is dental, is introduced in this year, and hence the total number of categories is 10. Now it is possible that UPSC may ask a question in which there is a statement which talks about the categories which are used for the NIRF. So correct answer for this particular situation would be that there are 10 different categories. Now let's focus on what all 10 categories are. So we can see here the 10 categories are listed on the left hand side of the screen. It is overall ranking, university wise ranking, engineering, management, colleges, pharmacy, medical, architecture, law, and dental. So we can see that dental has been added as the 10th category. Now, from the perspective of the coming examination, let's focus more about NIRF. So the full form of NIRF is National Institutional Ranking Framework. It is approved by Ministry of Human Resource Development and it was launched in September 2015. This framework actually outlines the methodology to rank institutions across the country. Now, the methodology that is basically utilized for the ranking purpose is drawn from the overall recommendations and broad understanding arrived at by the core committee set up by Ministry of Human Resource. The ranking framework evaluates institutions on the basis of 5 broad generic groups of parameters, which are first and foremost is teaching, learning and resources. Second is research and professional practice. Third is graduation outcomes, means how the people are placed, what they are doing the later part. Fourth is outreach and inclusivity. It means that what other institutions which get into collaboration with them. And last one is the perception or PR. So these are the important parameters on the basis of which overall recommendation and broad understanding is generated by the core committee. Now by this you must have understood that ranks are assigned which are based on the total sum of the marks assigned for each of these 5 broad parameters. So teaching, research, graduation, outreach, perception all participate in this particular thing. Now there are some parameters which are country specific as well, which are very important to accommodate the kind of flavor that we have, and hence country specific parameters which are relevant to Indian situations such as regional diversity, outreach, gender equality and inclusion of disadvantaged section of society is also included in the ranking methodology. Now, in order to give the ranking an unbiased approach, the data is sourced on various parameters and also from the third party sources. So, data that is received from these particular groups, which are third party sources, is shared with the institution for transparency with the provision to give their inputs. So in this fashion, it is ensured that ranking remains unbiased. Now with this, we should also understand the purpose of NIRF. Now NIRF gives ranking, and ranking provides these students who are looking for admission a litmus test or parameter for the selection of university. The important point is the criteria of the selection should be empirical, and it should allow the students to select institutes which basically help them in career building as well. Another aspect of this NIRF is that university can identify gaps and can take corrective action, whether we talk about teaching, learning resources, we talk about research and professional practice, or graduation outcome. So in this fashion, universities can actually work on the gaps which are identified and thereby improve their ranking in coming years. And last but not the least, once the universities start participating in such kind of ranking system, it shows that they have confidence in their institutions, which is very important for ensuring transparency and healthy competition. So we can see that NIRF is very important from the perspective of examination. All the facts which are highlighted are important from the perspective of coming prelims examination as well. Page number 11 of today's newspaper has a very interesting information from the perspective of coming UPSC examination. It talks about Lion census method outdated, and this is what the suggestion is in terms of experts. But the focus of our discussion is not about Lion census or the problems that have been highlighted, but all about canine distemper virus or CDV. If you read the subheading of the article, it clearly reads that deaths due to a virus were not reported, they say. Now, in this context, it is important for us to know what is canine distemper virus. Now, when we talk about canine distemper virus, the name is self-explanatory in terms of where it will influence most. When we talk about canine, canine means dogs, and this virus mainly causes severe infection in dogs, respiratory, gastrointestinal, and central nervous system, as well as conjunctival membranes in the eyes. But the question here is, if the virus affects dogs, how it is causing death in lion. The reason is that whenever lion goes for a kill, it does not eat the entire prey in one go. What they normally do, they eat a portion and then they come back again later. However, in between time, the dogs consume the kill and infect it with CDV, and once the lion returns to finish it off, it gets the deadly disease. So this is the reason why canine distemper virus is affecting the lion population. Another notable factor is that virus does not affect humans. At the same time, they may also be the carriers of the same. So you can see that humans are basically carriers of this particular disease, and this may negatively impact the population of Asiatic lions in Gir. So from this we can understand that there is a devastating link between canine distemper virus and potential epidemic which has been known since 1994, when within the Serengeti Mara ecosystem of East Africa, which is part of Tanzania, nearly one third of the lion population disappeared. So the kind of threat that we have seen in 1994 is still relevant or valid when we talk about Asiatic lion. Now, in this context, we should focus on babesiosis outbreak, which was reported in the Gir recently, and around 2 dozen lions were reported to be killed. Here, we need to understand that Babesua is a protozoa. Please pay attention to this factor that it is a protozoa that infects the red blood cells and is usually transmitted by a tick bite. Infection with Babesia is called as babesiosis. These facts are very important from the perspective of examination. Now we are aware of the fact that Gir forest is the last abode for Asiatic lion, and hence Indian Council of Medical Research has recommended that animals should be placed in 2-3 different sanctuaries, and hence ICMR has recommended that Asiatic lions must be kept at 2-3 different sanctuaries. The idea is very simple. If lions are located in different areas, they have a better chance of survival if such kind of a disease spreads in them. Now, from the perspective examination, let's focus on Asiatic lion as well. So, when we talk about IUCN Red List, it is considered to be endangered, and the CITES list, it is the part of Appendix 1. Apart from that, it is also part of Wildlife Protection Act 1972, Schedule 1. As already mentioned, the Gir forest is the only natural habitat of Asiatic lion. Now, in this context, you should also know more about Maldharis who have survived through ages by having a symbiotic relationship with the lions. So who these Maldharis are and what they normally do. Now please try to understand that Maldharis are the tribal herdsmen which basically inhabit the area called Banni. The literal meaning of Maldharis is keeper of animal stock. They basically do animal rearing, which includes sheep, goats, cows, buffaloes, and camels. And Gir National Park is home to around 8,400 Maldharis. So, this is an important fact that is important from the perspective of examination as well. So, keep a note of Maldhari population as well who inhabit in the area of Banni and Gir National Forest. Page number 11 of today's newspaper has a news item which talks about government considering universal basic income, says NHRC. Now you must be aware of the fact that universal basic income has been covered by Mehak Ma'am extensively in last session. Now in this context, what is more important is to understand why NHRC is submitting a report to the UN body, and that is why this entire article has been discussed in today's aspect. So context is very simple. In its report, NHRC, that is National Human Rights Commission, has informed United Nations Human Rights Council, that is UNHRC, that the recommendation to implement universal basic income is under consideration by the government. Now, NHRC report has highlighted other issues such as ratification of international human rights instruments, issues of legislation of trafficking, and protection against child sexual abuse, gaps in the implementation of schemes for food security, and timely distribution of wages under various schemes for employment. So we can see that there is wide array of topics that are basically covered under NHRC for which it is reporting to UNHRC, and that is the point of interest for us to understand why it is so. So the question is, why did NHRC submit its report to UNHRC? So NHRC submitted its report to UNHRC, and this is the part of third round of the Universal Periodic Review. We will be talking about Universal Periodic Review in the coming slide. The interesting aspect of UPR or Universal Periodic Review is that it is conducted after every 4.5 years. The report, which was submitted by NHRC, was titled as May 2020, and it reviewed the implementation of 152 recommendations of UPR working group that the Indian government had accepted in September 2017. So this is one of the important aspects. This is what the commitment was, and this particular report is follow-up of that commitment. So this brings us to the important question: what is Universal Periodic Review? So Universal Periodic Review is a unique process which involves periodic review of human rights records of all 193 UN member states. So this is something which is happening on account of membership of UN. The UPR is a significant innovation of Human Rights Council which is based on equal treatment for all countries. It provides an opportunity to the states to declare what actions they have taken to improve the human rights situations in their countries and to overcome challenges to the enjoyment of human rights. The UPR also includes a sharing of best human rights practices around the globe. Now, in this context, we need to understand that this is going to be the third cycle. So, the first cycle for this entire event was 2008 to 2011. The second cycle was conducted for 2012 to 2016. And the third cycle that we are talking about, which is conducted now, has been conducted for 2017 to 2022. So these cycles are also very important from the perspective of examination. So we have an idea what is Universal Periodic Review. We also have an idea why National Human Rights Commission is submitting its report to UNHRC, and we also understand how important it is in terms of the UN members. So all the UN members are participating in this event. The last point of discussion is how was the UPR established. So UPR was established when Human Rights Council was created on 15th of March 2006 by the United Nations General Assembly, when the Human Rights Council was mandated to undertake Universal Periodic Review, which is based on objective as well as reliable information of the fulfillment by each of the states of its human rights obligation and commitment in a manner which ensures universality of coverage and equal treatment and respect for all states. So this is something which is important from the perspective of prelims, and you should keep a note of this. Page number 16 of today's newspaper has a news item which is important for the perspective of coming prelims examination and will come under the topic of environment, ecology and biodiversity. The title of the news is First Estimation Exercise of Indian Gaur in Nilgiris in Recent Years. So we'll try to know more about Indian Gaur which is found in Nilgiris in India. You can see here we have put in a map and also the red list status of Indian Gaur. So the Indian gaur is one of the largest bovine animals that are found on this planet. It is native to South and Southeast Asia. So you can see here in the map in India, it is found in South Asia. You can see here the portion which is highlighted, which is part of peninsula, and the eastern part of India, which is more of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and little bit of Chhattisgarh. Apart from that, it is also found in the Tarai belt of Nepal. Then you can see in the northeast, it is found in many states, then also in Burma, which is now known as Myanmar. Apart from that, you can see that this is found in Malaysia, along with that also in Vietnam. Now, this particular species is found in a wide area, but still it is considered to be vulnerable under the IUCN list. So you can see here under the IUCN list, which is highlighted here. Also important here is to note that this particular status is going on since 1986. Another important thing that you must know is that because of lack of conservation, Indian gaur has gone extinct in Bangladesh as well as in Sri Lanka. So earlier it was found in Bangladesh as well as Sri Lanka, but currently it is not found there. So the global population has declined by more than 70% in last 3 generations, and as already mentioned, it has gone extinct in Sri Lanka and also in Bangladesh. At the same time, in well protected areas, the population has remained stable and is increasing as well. As already mentioned, it is one of the largest species among the wild cattle and it is called by different names in different countries. So in Malaysia, it is called as Seladang and Payang in Myanmar. The domesticated form of gaur is called as Gayal or Mithun. So these are the important piece of information that you must know. However, remember that since Nilgiri is mentioned, you can always recall that Indian gaur is found in Nilgiri forest. So this is the region where you should pay attention to. With this, we have come to the question of the day. The question of the day reads, which one of the following statements about Indian gaur are correct? The first statement is Indian gaur is found only in India. Statement 2 is according to IUCN list, it comes under the endangered species. We have to choose the correct answer from the code given below. Options are option A, 1 only, option B, 2 only, option C, both 1 and 2, and option D, neither 1 nor 2.